If you were to look at my LinkedIn profile, specifically earlier in my career, you would notice a few short stints. And a hiring manager looking at that back then might have looked at that and said, I think Ben might be a job hopper. And any of you out there watching this who have been labeled as such or feel like you have short stints on your resume that make it harder for you to get a job, know just how challenging it is to be perceived as a job hopper. But in today's video, I'm going to teach you everything you need to do, say, and prepare yourself so that you can overcome this label of a job hopper. Let's go. Now, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to get your mind ready for it, right? Get the correct mindset. Know that when you're going into an interview, it is going to come up. You are going to have to address it, and don't be caught off guard. One of the most challenging things about any interview question or anything that might happen in an interview is not being prepared for it. Just by being mentally prepared for it. Go into your interviews knowing, I know this is going to come up and I am going to be ready to address it. Just having that mindset is going to make it a little bit easier for you to deal with that in the moment. Now, the second thing you need to do to overcome this objection is you need to be incredibly well prepared. And you need to go in there and crush that interview. I can tell you, hiring managers have a lot easier time getting over some short stints if they feel you're an amazing candidate, right? If you're the type of candidate where they go, this person can clearly make an impact, they are great. They were well prepared, they are well qualified, they had a few short stints, but everything about them is super, super enticing. That is going to make it a lot easier for you. So what can you do to be that person? Well, you can prepare. You can go into it knowing the questions they're going to ask. You can prepare yourself to speak to your accomplishments, your achievements. You can practice some of the most common interview questions. If you go to my playlist, Interview Questions and Answers, you can get ready to answer them. Being a great candidate is really going to help you overcome a few short stints. Because again, hiring managers are much more likely to overlook that if they feel like everything else that you bring to the table is going to be amazing. Now, the third thing I would suggest doing is having a really great LinkedIn profile and a really great resume. It is hard to win the race if you don't get invited. So when you're applying through their website, an applicant tracking system, or if they're going and they're checking out your profile on LinkedIn, if you have a few short stints, it's still going to help you a ton if they look at that and everything else is incredibly compelling. They look at that and they go, Ben has a great profile, he has a great resume, he looks really good. Now, there's a few short stints, but look at all the things he's done. A really great resume can make a huge difference if they're looking at it and you want them to overlook a few short stints. Now, I'm not a resume expert. I am more in the realm of teaching you how to interview. But if you want help with your resume from an award-winning resume writer, go down in the description box of my LinkedIn profile. There is a link there where I say get resume and LinkedIn help. Click that. And if you mention when you talk to them, Ben Talks Talent, you will get a 10% discount. Same with your LinkedIn profile. Again, that is one of those things where it is really hard to win a race if you don't get invited to the race. And having a great LinkedIn profile and having a great resume, that is an important step to getting invited to most of the races or interviews. Now, the next thing, and maybe the most important, these are all important, but one of the most important things is be prepared to explain every short stint on your resume. What qualifies as a short stint? I would say anything less than 3 years. The average tenure for someone in America, and I imagine it's relatively similar in other countries, is 3.1 years. That is like the average time someone stays at a company. So if you have anything shorter than that, just know that a hiring manager might look at this and go, hey, Ben, why did you leave ABC company after only a year and a half? So anything shorter than 3 years, be prepared to speak to that. And one of the most important things you can do when you're talking about that is you want to be positive. You never want to be negative. You don't want to put blame on anyone. You want to be overly, overall, you just want to be positive. It rarely benefits you to be negative in an interview setting, so you want to be positive when you talk to it. But again, think about each one of those stops and prepare a reason that is reasonable, right? Think about things like, well, the company switched programs, they switched systems that made my job redundant. Or, I had a boss that I really liked, and they ended up leaving the department, and there was a period where there wasn't a person in charge, so I decided to look elsewhere. Or I realized that there was no room for advancement in this position, so I decided that I wanted to look elsewhere to find a place. Or this company reached out to me. I wasn't intending to move, but they reached out to me with an incredibly compelling offer, and that's why I left short. So these are all reasons, right? So think about realistic, reasonable reasons why someone might leave a position, and just be prepared to talk to every stint shorter than 3 years in a positive manner. Research is important, and the next thing I want you to do is when you find out who you're going to be interviewing with, be it a recruiter, be it a hiring manager, be it HR, but specifically the hiring manager, that's most important, go to their LinkedIn profile. You should be doing this anyway, just to do cursory research on them, their background, things you might have in common, etc. But it would be good to see how long they've been at their company. This isn't to throw it at their face, right? If they've only been there for a year and before that they were somewhere for a year and they go, hey Ben, why did you stay here? You wouldn't go, well, you only had a spot where you stayed for a year, but it is relevant context. You do want to know this because if they've been at their current company for 15 years and the company before that, they were there for 7 years, in their 22-year career, they've only had 2 stops. So longevity in a role is probably more important to them than if you're interviewing someone who has a 3-year, a 2-year, a 3-year. You're less likely to encounter that objection with that person who has moved more frequently. So just so you know what you're walking into, I would always recommend going to their LinkedIn profile and seeing their tenure in roles and how long they've stayed, just because it's going to increase the likelihood of you knowing if it's going to come up or not. Now, the next thing I want you to do is when you're talking about the roles you've had and you're addressing shorter stints, I want you to say things like, I was hoping to stay at that company long-term, but, followed by a reason that makes sense, right? There was downsizing. They ran into financial issues. We merged with another organization and some of the work was making redundant and I wanted to get out ahead of that, right? These are all reasonable things. But instead of just saying to them, I left because of this, when you say, I was hoping to stay there long term, it positions it that you moved kind of against your will. You didn't want to leave early. You wanted to stay for a long time. Also say things like, right now I'm looking for a company to commit to long term, right? A lot of interviewing is about risk mitigation from a hiring manager perspective, right? They want to know if they invest in you that you are going to stay. If they hire you, train you, invest in you, right? There's a cost associated with that. They want to know that you're going to stay for a long term. So saying things like, I'm looking to stay in my next company for the long term. Or I'm looking, if you're closer to retirement, you're like, I'm looking to find a company that I can retire from. Things like that. Even if they have questions about some of the shorter stints, at least make them a little bit more comfortable with your intentions. So make sure you say things like, again, I was hoping to stay at this company long term, and I'm looking for a company where I can stay for a long time. Things like that, while small, can help. Now, the last thing I would recommend doing is if you can have references from some of the companies where you had shorter stays and they're willing to be references for you, that helps because they can attest to the fact that you were a quality candidate. One of the reasons people are concerned about job hopping, besides the fact that, again, risk mitigation, it's that they're concerned that the work wasn't high quality and you had to leave because you didn't do a good job. So how can you combat that? Well, you can combat that by having people who have worked with you at those shorter stints being willing to write you letters of recommendation or be a reference when it comes time for them to do a reference check. So that's another thing you can do. They're concerned to be like, Ben, you stayed at this company for a short time. I got to be honest, I'm a little uncomfortable with that. You would say something along the lines of, that's reasonable and I totally understand that. At the time, I really was hoping I wouldn't have to move, but ABC caused me to look for employment elsewhere. One of the things I'd be willing to do is I'd be willing to put you in touch with this person who I worked with at that organization who can speak to the quality of work I did while I was there. I would be happy to do that if that would make you just a little bit more comfortable with that stay on my resume. Things like that can really go a long way to helping a hiring manager be a little bit more comfortable with a shorter stint. There you have it. That's how I would prepare and deal with this issue. Again, I've been there. I know it is challenging. That label is not always fair, but you have to understand it from the hiring manager's perspective. Risk mitigation and quality of work, if you can address these things adequately, you will go a long way to overcoming the stigma of being a job hopper. That's the video. If you liked it and you were not subscribed, please subscribe. I come out with 3 videos weekly that are all designed to help you become a better candidate and maximize your career. If you were already subscribed, feel free to like the video, comment below. Thank you for showing up. I appreciate you. Good luck in your next interview. You got this.